Hello. So I've recently reorganised my bookshelves, so I thought, why not do a bookshelf tour? This is my main Doctor Who bookcase, and it's where I keep most of my Doctor Who reference books. At the very top of the bookshelf, I keep a small selection of books, basically organised by height. Next to these two Daleks, I have a couple of Dalek books, starting with this stunning Barnes & Noble bind-up of Remembrance of the Daleks and Prisoner of the Daleks, and it has awesome gold pages as well. It's just very attractive, isn't it? Next, I have The Only Good Dalek, an awesome 11th Doctor graphic novel. Rather randomly, I have The Dangerous Book of Monsters and How to Be a Time Lord. Next to them, I have Whoology and 11 Doctors, 11 Stories. And then I also have the regenerated edition of Whoology, which is exactly the same as the first one, just updated to include Twice Upon a Time. And that's it for the top shelf. The first actual shelf is larger reference books, loosely organised by colour, and guarded by an assortment of Doctor Who pop figures. The first book on this shelf is Dalek, which is just a phenomenal beast of a book. I have Space Travels, which is a pop-up book, a fun novelty to have in the collection. Next to that I have A Celebration, 2 Decades Through Time and Space. The Vault. I have the Doctor Who model making book. I came across this in a charity shop, along with the other model making kits you'll see on this shelf, and couldn't resist adding them to the collection. Next, the Doctor Who Doodle book and Dr. Doc, which are just a few fun craft art books. I have the Dalek pop-up model making kit, and then next to that I keep the 6 Panini comics that came with the subscription to the Doctor Who Complete History. So I've got the Iron Legion, The Tides of Time, Voyager, The Flood, The Cruel Sea, and The Widow's Curse. Next I have It's Bigger on the Inside, which is an activity book published by Marvel Comics in the 80s, another fun little charity shop find. I have the updated edition of the Character Encyclopedia, and Doctor Who Adventures in Time and Space. The Making of the Television Series, Time Travels, which is another of the pop-up books. I'd recommend this one over the Space Travels one as it's relatively more substantial and has some fun pull-out bits inside, like Kathy Nightingale's letter to Sally Sparrow. Then I have The Monsters, which has this gorgeous illustrated cover. Next I have the official handbook for the Doctor Who Festival. And the last of my charity shop hunted model making kits is this series 3 TARDIS one. I have Classic Who The Hinchcliffe Years and Classic Who The Harper Classics. Doctor Who A Book of Monsters, which is a really interesting read covering behind the scenes facts and essentially the creation behind a host of Classic Who foes. I have the Doctor's 30 Years of Time Travel, and then I have the 2 Torchwood magazine yearbooks, which collate some of the best features from previous issues. I have the Whoniverse, which is hands down my favourite Doctor Who reference book that I've ever purchased. Would recommend this to any Doctor Who fan. Next I have the free UK versions of the visual dictionaries, starting with this one, which was one of the first Doctor Who books I ever got, so I'm quite fond of this. The next one is the 2010 edition, which features the 11th Doctor, and then the 2014 Visual Dictionary, updated and expanded to cover Series 8. Next I have this beautiful Radio Times bookazine, which is a collection of their coverage of Modern Who from 2005 to 2010, and then the very last thing on this shelf is the programme from the 50th anniversary celebration, which is one of the best Doctor Who events I've ever been to. The next shelf again is slightly organised by height, but then again not really. It's basically a wonderful mess of various Who books. And there's more pop figures. The first thing on this shelf is the Monster book, which is beautifully designed. Rather randomly I have the official 50th anniversary annual, which the rest of my Modern Who annuals are actually in a box under the stairs because I ran out of space, but clearly this one survived for some reason. Next to that is the Torchwood Archives, which is fantastic. It's just a perfect book, and I refuse to believe otherwise. I have The 9 Lives of Doctor Who, which is a collection of biographies of the first 9 actors to play the Doctor, including Peter Cushing. The Encyclopedia, and then I have the updated Encyclopedia, which includes the early 11th Doctor era. I have the brilliant book 2012, which lives up to its name. the Ultimate Monster Guide, and then this updated edition of the Ultimate Monster Guide. And then, if 2 copies wasn't enough, I also have the 3 books the Ultimate Monster Guide is made up of: Monsters and Villains, Aliens and Enemies, Creatures and Demons, and then Starships and Space Stations. The Character Encyclopedia, Who Graphica, A History of the Universe in 100 Objects, the official Doctor Who sticker book. Next are some of my favourite Who reference books, including Time Lord Letters. I love books that are made from the perspective of an in-universe writer, and this one essentially collates letters from the show. The Secret Lives of Monsters, The Doctor, His Lives and Times, is another great book. Next I have The Inside Story, a really detailed look at the first 2 series of One Who. Then I have The Time Traveller's Almanac and The Essential Guide, released for Who's 50th anniversary. Next I have this sort of biographical style book about David Tennant, aptly titled David Tennant. Then I have a similar book, but this one is about Matt Smith, and it's tied into him being the 11th Doctor, whereas the Tennant one is just about his acting career in general. Moving on to my collection of classic Who annuals, I have the Doctor Who Annual 1966, 1974, 1976, the Dalek Annual 1979, the Doctor Who Annual 1980, 1982, the K9 Annual 1983, and the Doctor Who Annual 1984. I have the illustrated A to Z, and then I have all 5 of the Doctor Who Discovers books, which consist of Doctor Who Discovers Prehistoric Animals, The Conquerors, Early Man, Strange and Mysterious Creatures, and Space Travel. And each one comes with a poster of the cover, which is quite fun. Next I have the Dinosaur book, which isn't part of the Doctor Who Discovers series but follows the same format. Next is Time View, the complete Doctor Who illustrations of Frank Bellamy, which is an awesome collection. Next is the Doctor Who Technical Manual, which, as the blurb describes, was a totally new concept in Doctor Who literature. It's basically just a guide to technical gadgets and gizmos, and also has some plans and diagrams. Next is the TARDIS Inside Out, which is actually nothing to do with the TARDIS, and is actually John Nathan Turner's insights into the production process, and it also talks about the first 6 Doctors. This book also contains awesome illustrations by Andrew Skilleter, so it's very visually pleasing. Then I have the Doctor Who Monster book, and the last thing on this shelf is the brilliant book 2011. The third shelf is slightly more organised, again by height. It has a few more reference books and also some novels, adorned with more pop figures. And then a framed Power of 3 postcard, because why not? So the first books on this shelf are the Intergalactic Survival Guide, the Official Dictionary, and Doctor Who 100 Scariest Monsters. Then I have Engines of War, which is one of my favourite novels. Next is Then and Now, Volume 1, Early Modern Who analysed and reviewed by David J. Howe. I have Doctor Who The Episode Guide, Behind the Sofa, The Doctor's Who's Who, Encyclopedia of the Worlds of Doctor Who A to D, and E to K. Next is The Making of Doctor Who, The Adventures of K9 and Other Mechanical Creatures, Terry Nation's Dalek Special, Howard's Transcendental Toy Box, and Wit, Wisdom and Timey-wimey Stuff. Moving on to biographies and such, I have Blue Box Boy by Matthew Waterhouse, Elizabeth Sladen, the autobiography, Peter Davison Is There Life Outside the Box, A Life in Time and Space, the biography of David Tennant, Matt Smith, the biography, and John Barrowman's second autobiography, I Am What I Am. Moving on to anthologies and short story collections, I have Time Trips, The American Adventures, Myths and Legends, The Scientific Secrets of Doctor Who, 12 Angels Weeping. I have Time Lord Fairy Tales, there's some great little stories in here, and 12 Doctors of Christmas, and Tales of Terror. Moving on to novels, I have The Cricket Men, City of Death, and Scratchman. And then the very last 2 books on this shelf are a couple of script books. So I've got Doctor Who The Scripts, Tom Baker, 1974/5, and the Audio Scripts, Volume 3. And then the final shelf on this bookcase is full of my Past Doctor and 8th Doctor Adventures books, because they seem to fit perfectly in this small section. But before I get to them, because this is actually quite a deep bookcase, there are actually a few more random books hiding behind them. So I have the Dalek Handbook, the Time Traveller's Journal, this Diddy Dalek Survival Guide, the Doctor Who Scripts, the Tribe of Gum, and the Demons, and the Collected Files 1 to 4. I have these 3 Doctor Who Top Trumps books, and then we move on to the PDAs. The Devil Goblins from Neptune, The Murder Game, The Witch Hunters, and Salvation are all hidden at the back. Then in the front row I have Storm Harvest, Tomb of Valdemar, Grave Matter, Primetime, The Shadow in the Glass, Bullet Time, Science Fiction, Relative Dementias, 10 Little Aliens, Heritage, Blue Box, Wolfsbane, Deadly Reunion, Sparrow Scratch, and Atom Bomb Blues. Moving on to EDAs, I have The Body Snatchers, War of the Daleks, Option Lock, Legacy of the Daleks, The Scarlet Empress, Demontage, Dominion, The Taking of Planet 5, The Banquo Legacy, Vanishing Point, The Slow Empire, The Crooked World, The Gallifrey Chronicles, and then I have Short Trips, the last book on the shelf. And that concludes this tour of my reference books bookcase. I'll be doing a tour of my other Doctor Who bookcases in my next video, so stick around for that if you're interested, and thank you very much for watching.